Can you imagine biting into a perfectly crisp apple in the dead of winter, months after harvest? No refrigerator, chemicals, or sugar. That's the magic of traditional Amish food preservation. Time-honored methods passed down through generations that preserve nature's sweetness without the use of modern technology. Most of us can't go a week without using store-bought preservatives. What about the Amish? For centuries, they've done things differently. They keep fruits fresh without refrigeration, sugar, or chemicals. Curious? You should be. Today, we're delving into the forgotten art of Amish fruit preservation, in which nature does all the work. By the end, you'll wonder why you ever used store-bought jams, syrups, or sugary preservatives. Let's go. Let's start with something unexpected: salt curing. When you think of salt preservation, your thoughts most likely turn to meat. Perhaps you are picturing beef jerky or salted ham. What if I told you that the Amish use salt to preserve fruit? Yes, fruits, I know it sounds strange, salted apples. But here's a secret. The salt isn't there to flavor the fruit. It's there to perform some scientific magic. Salt draws moisture out of the fruit, and as we all know, moisture is a breeding ground for bacteria. Bacteria cannot thrive in the absence of water. Press the subscribe button now to see more Amish and traditional ways of living healthy. The Amish discovered this long ago, using salt to dehydrate fruits such as apples, pears, and even some berries. The key is balance. They use just enough salt to dry out the fruit without it tasting like you're chewing on a salt shaker. It's a slow process. The fruit slowly loses moisture while maintaining its natural sweetness. You end up with fruit that has been preserved for months without refrigeration, chemicals, or added sugar. And the best part? It retains its chewy, sweet texture, making it ideal for snacking, baking, or incorporating into homemade trail mix recipes. I'll be honest, when I first tried this at home, I thought, how difficult could it be? I sprinkled a little too much salt on my apples and waited. Let's just say I was expecting a sweet, chewy treat, but received something that tasted more like apple-flavored salt. Lesson learned. Moderation is essential. The Amish have mastered it, which explains why their fruits taste so good. This method may appear ancient, but that is because it works. It has been used for centuries, long before refrigeration even existed. And here's the best part. It still works as well as it did then. Preserving nature's bounty requires only a pinch of salt and a lot of patience. You want to learn how they preserve fruits with salt? Press the subscribe button now to see more Amish and traditional ways of living healthy. Listen to the next 2 minutes and you can try it at home. The Amish use salt to preserve fruits by carefully applying just the right amount to draw out moisture without overwhelming the natural sweetness. Here's how they do it. First step is preparation of the fruit. The Amish start by selecting firm, ripe fruits, like apples or pears, which hold up well in the preservation process. They cut the fruit into thin slices, making it easier to dehydrate. The second step is applying the salt. A light sprinkle of salt is added to the fruit. The salt helps to pull moisture out of the fruit, creating an environment where bacteria cannot thrive. However, the Amish are careful not to add too much salt to avoid overpowering the fruit's flavor. The third step is drying process. Once salted, the fruit is left in a dry, airy place. Over time, the salt gradually draws out the moisture. This process dehydrates the fruit while keeping its natural flavors intact. The slow drying helps maintain a chewy, sweet texture perfect for snacking or cooking. Fourth step is storage. Once dehydrated, the fruit can be stored for months without refrigeration. It's typically packed in airtight containers or jars to maintain freshness. By using salt and thyme, the Amish have perfected a simple, chemical-free preservation method that keeps fruits deliciously edible and ready to enjoy throughout the year. If you tried it already, let me know in the comments, how are the fruits preserved with salt? Do you like them? Now let's move on from salt to something even simpler: air. That's correct, it's just air. The Amish make a centuries-old method appear simple. Air drying fruits is similar to hanging laundry outside, but in this case, the fruit is hanging to dry. The Amish will string together slices of apples, apricots, or pears in the warm, dry air, allowing nature to do the heavy lifting. There are no fancy dehydrators or machines buzzing in the background, only sunlight, fresh air, and a little time. It's the epitome of simplicity, and the outcome? Dried fruits are packed with concentrated sweetness and contain no added sugar or chemicals. I'll admit, this inspired me to try it myself one summer. I decided to channel my inner Amish farmer by setting up a makeshift clothesline in the backyard, stringing some apple slices, and waiting. What I didn't account for was the neighborhood wildlife. Let's just say my drying apples became a feast for every bird and squirrel in the area. So, word to the wise, protect your drying fruits. However, when done correctly, air-dried fruit can last months and tastes better than anything found in a package. Here's an interesting fact. Studies show that sun-dried fruits retain more nutrients than machine-dried fruits. So the Amish not only save energy, but they also preserve nutritional value. This method is ideal for preserving the purity and goodness of your fruits while ensuring that your snack is free of chemicals. Press the subscribe button now to see more Amish and traditional ways of living healthy. If the Amish know anything, it's how to make the most of what nature provides, and nothing exemplifies this more than their use of root cellars. Consider a root cellar to be the original refrigerator, a cool, dark, underground space where fruits like apples and pears can stay fresh for months on end. There is no electricity or preservatives, only the Earth's natural insulation doing its job. If you're anything like me, your apples become mushy after 2 weeks in the fridge. Apples, on the other hand, can last up to 6 months in a root cellar under optimal conditions. Imagine pulling out a perfectly crisp apple in February that you picked in September. It's like having a taste of fall in the middle of winter. When I first attempted to build my own root cellar, it was more of a DIY experiment. I dug a small pit in my backyard, lined it with rocks, and assumed I was in business. It worked for a while, but be sure to check on your stored fruits. Let's just say my apples ended up looking like a science experiment rather than a snack. Is this a lesson you've learned? Still, when done correctly, root cellars are incredible. They are sustainable, environmentally friendly, and do not rely on any modern technology. It's literally nature protecting nature. Let's talk about vinegar as a flavoring agent. Press the subscribe button now to see more Amish and traditional ways of living healthy. You may be thinking, vinegar? Isn't that just for pickles? However, in Amish communities, vinegar is used to preserve fruits such as berries, apples, and pears. And it does more than just preserve, it transforms. Vinegar is naturally acidic, which creates a hostile environment for bacteria. So, in addition to keeping the fruit from spoiling, it adds a tangy depth of flavor that other preservation methods do not provide. Imagine biting into a strawberry that has been soaking in vinegar for a few days. It's sweet, tangy, and has just the right bite. And the best part? No sugar or artificial preservatives, just the fruit and vinegar. I once tried vinegar curing with some leftover strawberries. I was feeling adventurous, so I added a few herbs and spices to the mix, let them sit in the vinegar, and when I finally tasted them, wow! Sweet, with a little zing, and full of flavor. Just a quick note, if you try this at home, don't use too much vinegar. Believe me, there's a fine line between tangy and, whoa, that's intense. Do you want to learn how to preserve fruits with vinegar like a real Amish? Listen to the next 2 minutes and you can try it at home. The Amish use vinegar to preserve fruits in a natural, sugar-free method that adds a tangy depth of flavor. Here's how they do it. First step is preparing the fruit. The Amish select fresh, ripe fruits like berries, apples, or pears. After washing and cutting the fruit as needed, they place it in sterilized jars to ensure a clean preservation environment. Second step is creating the vinegar solution. The fruit is covered with vinegar, often apple cider or white vinegar, which creates an acidic environment that discourages bacterial growth. This natural acidity preserves the fruit by preventing spoilage. Third step is flavoring with herbs and spices, optional. To enhance the flavors, they may add herbs and spices like rosemary, thyme, cinnamon, or cloves. These additions not only infuse the fruit with complex flavors but also act as mild preservatives. Fourth step is sealing and storing. Once filled, the jars are sealed tightly and stored in a cool, dark place. Over a few days to weeks, the fruit absorbs the vinegar, giving it a tangy, slightly sweet flavor. Vinegar preservation is a simple, chemical-free Amish method that keeps fruits flavorful and fresh for long periods, making them perfect for winter use or as flavorful condiments. If you tried it already, let me know in the comments how are the fruits preserved in the vinegar. Do you like them? However, vinegar isn't the only natural preservative the Amish use. They've also mastered the technique of honey preservation. We all know honey is a sweetener, but did you know it's also a natural preservative? That's right, honey has been used for thousands of years to preserve food. Archaeologists have even discovered honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that is still edible. When the Amish preserve fruit with honey, they do more than simply sweeten it. The honey forms a barrier against moisture and bacteria, preserving the fruit's flavor and texture for months. And the best part? The fruit soaks up the delicious honey flavor. When you bite into a honey-preserved apple or pear, you're tasting the best version of the fruit, sweet, juicy, and perfectly preserved. I tried this method with fresh berries last summer, and it was a game changer. I combined the berries and honey, sealed them in a jar, and forgot about them for a few days. When I finally opened the jar, the smell was incredible, sweet, fruity, and slightly floral from the honey. I ended up eating half the jar in one sitting, and I had no regrets because it was so good. But the Amish don't stop with honey. They also use a technique that may surprise you: beeswax sealing. This one blew my mind when I first heard about it. The Amish will dip fresh fruits such as apples and pears in melted beeswax. The wax hardens around the fruit, leaving an airtight seal that keeps it fresh for months. It's like wrapping the fruit in its own natural armor, preventing decay while allowing it to breathe. Beeswax sealing is a sustainable, all-natural way to keep fruit fresh, and it is completely consistent with the Amish philosophy of utilizing natural resources. Plus, there's something magical about pulling out an apple in the middle of winter, cracking open the beeswax and discovering it's still as fresh as the day it was harvested. If you're feeling really adventurous, you could even try ash preservation. This is an ancient technique that the Amish continue to use today. Fruits such as apples and pears will be packed in clean wood ash, which acts as a bacteria barrier. It may sound strange, but it works. The alkaline nature of the ash creates a hostile environment for bacteria, allowing the fruit to remain fresh for months. Now, I understand what you're thinking. Ash on fruit sounds a little medieval, right? That's because it is. People have been using ash preservation for centuries, and with good reason. It works. The ash acts as a natural preservative, keeping out moisture and bacteria. And don't worry, when it's time to eat, simply wash off the ash and the fruit underneath will be fine. In fact, it's better than fine because it's preserved in a way that keeps all of its natural flavor and texture. Press the subscribe button now to see more Amish and traditional ways of living healthy. I remember the first time I used this method, I was skeptical. Who would pack fruit in ash? But I had some extra apples lying around, so why not? So I packed them in a layer of wood ash and stored them, as the Amish do. A few months later, I took them out, brushed off the ash, and tried it. And you know what? Those apples tasted as fresh as if they had just been picked from the tree. It was like discovering a flavor-filled time capsule. Sure, it may not be the most common method, but sometimes the oldest tricks work the best. Let's now discuss another method used by the Amish that is both simple and ingenious: fermentation. You've probably heard of fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, and yogurt. But did you know that the Amish use fermentation to preserve fruit? Yes, they let nature take its course, using wild yeast and bacteria to naturally preserve fruit without the use of chemicals or added sugars. Here's how it works. When fruit is fermented, yeast and bacteria break down the natural sugars, converting them into alcohol and CO2. This not only prevents the fruit from spoiling, but also imparts a distinct tangy flavor that is unlike any other. It's a method that enhances the flavor while keeping the fruit safe to eat for months. Fermented foods are also beneficial to your gut health because probiotics are produced during the fermentation process. One summer, I decided to try fermenting cherries. I followed a simple recipe, sealed them in a jar, and allowed them to ferment for a few days. When I finally opened the jar, I heard the satisfying pop of carbonation escape. But how did it taste? Incredible. Press the subscribe button now to see more Amish and traditional ways of living healthy. The cherries were sweet and tangy, with a hint of fizz. A completely different take on a fruit I thought I knew well. If you want to add some flavor to your preserved fruits, fermentation is the way to go. Do you want to learn how to preserve fruits using fermentation method like a real Amish? Listen to the next 2 minutes, and you can try it at home. The Amish use fermentation to preserve fruits by harnessing natural processes that enhance flavor and extend shelf life. Here's how they use fermentation as a preservation method. Step 1. Selecting and preparing the fruit. The Amish choose ripe, fresh fruits like cherries, apples, or berries. The fruit is washed and sliced or lightly mashed to allow fermentation to begin more easily. Step 2. Creating the brine, if needed. For some fruits, they prepare a saltwater brine to create an ideal environment for fermentation. This brine inhibits harmful bacteria while encouraging beneficial, naturally occurring lactic acid bacteria, which help preserve the fruit. Step 3. Adding starter cultures or letting nature work. Sometimes the Amish may add a natural starter culture, like a bit of whey or leftover fermented brine from a previous batch. For many fruits, however, they rely on wild airborne yeasts to start the fermentation process. The natural sugars in the fruit are broken down by these beneficial microbes, releasing carbon dioxide and producing tangy flavors. Step 4. Sealing and storing. The fruit and brine mixture is packed into sterilized jars, leaving a bit of headspace. The jars are then loosely covered to allow gas to escape, or they use airlock lids to prevent contamination while allowing for pressure release. Step 5. Fermenting and monitoring. Over several days to weeks, the fruit ferments, developing a unique tangy flavor and beneficial probiotics. The Amish monitor the jars, checking for desired taste and adjusting fermenting times as needed. Fermented fruits are stored in a cool place where they last for months. This method not only preserves the fruit, but also enriches it with probiotics, making it a flavorful, gut-friendly addition to meals that stays fresh naturally. Of course, when it comes to natural preservation, we can't ignore one of the most traditional methods: lard sealing. For centuries, the Amish have used rendered animal fat, or lard, to preserve fruits. It's a lard-based method that works similarly to beeswax sealing. The fat forms a thick, airtight seal that preserves the freshness of the fruit. It may sound strange, but lard has some serious preservation properties. The key is that it blocks out oxygen, which is the primary cause of food spoilage. When fruits like apples are sealed in lard, they are effectively preserved in a protective coat that keeps them fresh for several months. I understand that dipping fruit in fat may not seem appealing at first, but it's just another example of how the Amish make the best use of every resource at their disposal. I was skeptical when I first tried this. I mean, fat and fruit, really? But I figured there had to be something to it since the Amish had been doing it for so long. So I gave it a try. I sealed some apple slices in lard and put them away. A few months later, I opened the lard shell and discovered that the apples inside were perfectly preserved. They tasted fresh, crisp, and surprisingly free of lard flavor. I'll admit that I was impressed. Lard sealing may not be for everyone, but it is definitely worth a shot if you want to stick with traditional preservation methods. It also makes good use of any leftover lard from cooking. Don't waste, don't want, right? You want to learn how they preserve fruits with lard sealing? Listen to the next 2 minutes, and you can try it at home. The Amish use lard as a natural, airtight seal to preserve fruits without refrigeration. Here's how they do it. First step is preparing the fruit. First, the Amish choose hardy fruits like apples or pears, known for holding their texture and flavor. The fruit is washed, dried thoroughly, and sometimes cut into smaller pieces, although often they keep the fruit whole. Second step is melting the lard. They melt a clean rendered lard until it becomes a pourable liquid. This lard serves as the preservation barrier, creating a thick coating around the fruit to block out air and prevent spoilage. Third step is coating the fruit. Once the lard is melted, the fruit is dipped into the lard or coated evenly. The lard solidifies around the fruit as it cools, forming an airtight seal that protects it from oxygen, which is a major cause of spoilage. Fourth step is storing the lard-coated fruit. After the lard has hardened, the coated fruit is stored in a cool, dry place, such as a pantry or root cellar. The lard shield keeps the fruit fresh for months by preventing bacterial growth and decay. Fifth step is using the preserved fruit. When ready to use, the lard is peeled away, revealing fresh fruit that still retains its original texture and flavor. This old-fashioned method allows fruit to stay edible throughout the winter without refrigeration, relying only on natural fat to preserve its freshness. This technique showcases the Amish approach to sustainable preservation by using simple, natural resources like lard to keep fruit fresh long after harvest. But don't overlook one of the most well-known Amish techniques that ties everything together: pressure canning. This one is probably more familiar to modern food preservers, but it's still worth mentioning because the Amish have nailed it. Pressure canning is a process that involves sealing fruit in jars and cooking it at high temperatures and pressures. The high heat kills any bacteria, and the pressure creates a perfect airtight seal that keeps fruit fresh for years. Yes, you heard that correctly. Years. Properly canned fruit can last for a long time, allowing you to eat summer peaches in the dead of winter or open a jar of strawberries long after their season has passed. What is the best part? Press the subscribe button now to see more Amish and traditional ways of living healthy. Pressure canning preserves both the flavor and the nutrients, so you don't have to sacrifice health for convenience. I remember the first time I tried to eat peaches. It was a messy process, sticky syrup everywhere, but the end result was well worth the effort. When I opened a jar of those sweet, sun-ripened peaches in the middle of winter, it felt like summer in a jar. If you haven't tried pressure canning yet, it's well worth adding to your preservation toolkit. It's an excellent way to ensure you always have fresh, delicious fruit on hand, regardless of the season. If you're looking to preserve fruits with pressure canning method, here are the steps that Amish people are doing. Step 1. Preparing the fruit in jars. Fresh fruits like peaches, pears, and berries are washed, peeled if necessary, and cut into appropriate sizes. The fruit is then packed into sterilized glass jars, leaving a bit of space at the top for expansion during canning. Step 2. Adding liquid and sweeteners, optional. Some Amish recipes call for adding water, juice, or a light syrup made from sugar to enhance flavor and prevent browning. Though many simply rely on the fruit's natural juices, the liquid helps fill any air gaps in the jar, reducing the risk of spoilage. Step 3. Sealing and prepping the canner. Once the jars are packed, they're topped with lids and rings that are hand-tightened. The Amish place the jars into a pressure canner, which is filled with water according to the canner's instructions. Step 4. Pressure canning process. The jars are processed in the pressure canner at a specific temperature and pressure, typically around 10 to 15 psi, pounds per square inch, for fruits. This high-pressure environment kills any bacteria, yeast, and molds, ensuring the fruit is safely preserved without needing artificial preservatives. Step 5. Cooling and storing. After the canning time is complete, the jars are removed and allowed to cool. As they cool, the lids form a vacuum seal, which keeps air out and prevents spoilage. Properly sealed jars are then stored in a cool, dark place where they can last for up to a few years. This method is sustainable, reliable, and doesn't require refrigeration, making it an ideal way for Amish families to maintain a well-stocked pantry. So, what is all of this telling us? It indicates that there are various methods for preserving fruit. The Amish have a whole arsenal of techniques at their disposal, whether it's salt curing, air drying, vinegar curing, beeswax sealing, ash preservation, fermentation, lard sealing, or pressure canning. techniques that don't rely on sugar, chemicals, or modern technology, and that anyone, yes, even you, can try at home. These methods may be old-fashioned, but they are far from outdated. In an increasingly convenience-driven world, the Amish remind us that sometimes the simplest way to preserve food is the best. These methods not only keep fruits fresh for months or even years, but they also enhance their natural flavors, resulting in food that is both delicious and sustainable. So the next time you're at the grocery store buying fruit, consider what happens when it begins to spoil. What if you didn't own a refrigerator or freezer? What if you want to preserve fruit without using sugar or artificial preservatives? That's where the Amish step in. They've been doing this for centuries, and their methods are still as effective today as they were generations ago. And the best part? You do not have to be Amish to use these techniques. Whether you live in a big city, a small town, or in the countryside, you can begin using these preservation methods right away. Consider having shelves lined with jars of perfectly preserved fruit, ready to eat when you want. No chemicals or added sugars, just pure, natural flavor as nature intended. In a world that is moving faster than ever, perhaps it's time to slow down, take a page from the Amish playbook, and rediscover the forgotten art of food preservation. After all, the best solutions are frequently the simplest. We've explored some amazing methods that not only keep food fresh, but also honor nature's bounty in the healthiest ways possible. Click on the video that's popping up right here on your screen. See you in the next video, where we'll uncover more secrets of the Amish way of life.